all across our country, people are becoming more and more conscious about the foods that they are eating and the foods that they are serving to their kids. And this is certainly true for genetically engineered foods. This is a major concern in my state of Vermont. It's a major concern, I know, in Senator Boxer's state of California. And in fact, it is a major concern all over our country. This year, in my state of Vermont, our legislature tried to pass a bill that would have required foods that contain genetically engineered ingredients to have that information on their labels. And that information would simply give consumers in the state of Vermont the knowledge about the ingredients that were in the food that they are ingesting. Not, I believe, a terribly radical idea. I personally believe, and I think most Americans believe, that when a mother goes to the store and purchases food for her child, she has the right to know what she is feeding her child, what is in the food that she's giving to her kids and her family. This concern about genetically engineered labeling brought out a huge turnout to the Vermont state legislature of people who were supportive of this concept. In fact, it was one of the most hotly debated and discussed issues in our legislature this year. Over 100 Vermonters testified at a committee meeting, the Agricultural Committee meeting of the state of Vermont, in favor of this legislation. We're a small state, and hundreds more crowded in the State House to show their support. So what people in Vermont, and I believe all over this country, are saying, simply and straightforwardly, is we want to know what is in the food we are eating and whether or not that food is genetically engineered. Clearly, this is not just a Vermont issue. Almost 1 million people in the state of California signed a petition to get labeling of genetically engineered food on the November ballot. And in California, big state, 1 million people is a lot of people. In other words, what we are seeing from Vermont and California all over this country, people want to know what is in the food that they are eating, and they want to know whether that food is genetically engineered. And I want to thank Senator Boxer of California for representing the people of her state in co-sponsoring this legislation. But this is not just a Vermont issue, it's not just a California issue. According to an MSNBC poll in February of 2011, 95% of Americans agree that labeling of food with genetically engineered ingredients should be allowed, and those polling numbers have been consistently over 90%, dating back to 2001. So what we are seeing in polling year after year is people want to know what is in the food that they are eating. Now, not everybody agrees. Monsanto, one of the world's largest producers of genetically engineered food, they don't like this idea. Monsanto is also the world's largest producer of the herbicide Roundup, as well as so-called Roundup-ready seeds that have been genetically engineered to resist the pesticide. It is no mystery why Monsanto would fight people's right to know. Business is booming for this huge chemical company. It raked in over $11 billion in revenues and cleared $1.6 billion in profits in 2011, and this year is going pretty well for Monsanto. So once it seemed possible that Vermont could pass the bill because the people of the state of Vermont wanted to see that legislation passed. But our friends at Monsanto threatened to sue the state if that bill was passed. Sadly, And this is what goes on in politics, not just on this issue, but on so many issues. Despite passing out of the House Agricultural Committee by a vote of 9-1, the bill didn't make it any further because of the fear of a lawsuit from this huge multinational corporation. But today, we have an opportunity with the Sanders-Boxer Amendment, number 2310, to affirm states' rights to label food that contained genetically engineered ingredients. There are strong precedents for labeling. The FDA, as everybody knows, already requires the labeling of over 3,000 ingredients, additives, and processes. If you want to know if your food contains gluten, aspartame, high fructose corn syrup, trans fats, or MSG, you simply read the ingredients label. Similarly, the FDA requires labeling for major food allergens such as peanuts, wheat, shellfish, and others. But Americans, for some reason, are not afforded that same information when it comes to genetically engineered foods. Now, here is a very important point to make. What I am asking now for the people of America is something that exists right now all over the world. Genetically engineered foods are already required to be labeled in 49 countries around the world, including Russia, the UK, Australia, South Korea, Japan, Brazil, China, New Zealand, and others, and the entire European Union allows its countries to require such labels, which is essentially what this amendment is about. It is not telling, but it is requiring. It is allowing states the right to go forward if that is what the people of those states want. So if this is good for 49 or more countries around the world, why is it not acceptable in the United States of America? And the answer is pretty simple, that we have a large, powerful, multinational corporation who is more concerned about their own profits than they are about allowing the American people to know what is in the food that they are eating. In 3 days, on June 17th, the American Medical Association will consider resolutions that ask for studies on the impacts of GE foods and labeling. Resolutions calling for labeling of GE foods have already been passed by the American Public Health Association and the American Nurses Association. There is a great need for this information because there has never been mandatory human clinical trials of genetically engineered crops, no tests for its possibility of causing cancer or for harm to fetuses, no long-term testing for human health risks, no requirement for long-term testing on animals, and only limited allergy testing. What this means is that for all intent and purposes, the long-term health study on GE food is being done on the American people. The Sanders-Boxer Consumers' Right to Know about Genetically Engineered Food Amendment, Amendment number 2310, is about allowing states to honor the wishes of their residents and allowing consumers to know what they are eating. If this is not a conservative amendment, I don't know what is. Americans deserve the right to know what they and their children are eating, and that is what this amendment is all about. Monsanto and other major corporations should not be the ones to decide this issue. The United States Congress and the American people should make that decision.